The prison yard fell silent as the iron gates clanged open. Guards stood in a tense row, watching the woman in the orange jumpsuit being escorted out. Her wrists trembled in handcuffs, but her eyes held only one thing: hope. She had asked for a final request before execution: to see her German shepherd, Shadow. When the dog appeared at the far end of the yard, the officers stiffened. His hackles rose, his teeth bared, a thunderous growl ripping through the air. The woman flinched, tears streaking her face. But then Shadow did something none of the guards expected. And in that instant, everything about her case, her innocence, and her fate changed forever. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The final 12 hours before her execution ticked away with an unbearable heaviness. Inside the dim corridor of death row, every sound felt sharper, every footstep, every clanging door, every distant radio call. She sat on the narrow cot, hands clasped tightly, trying to stop them from shaking. The guards who usually ignored her now watched her with an odd mixture of pity and suspicion, whispering among themselves as they passed her cell. Her meal tray sat untouched. Her throat was too tight for food, her mind too clouded to focus. She kept glancing at the small clock on the wall, each minute stabbing deeper. Tonight her life would end. Yet something inside her whispered that the truth hadn't died with her conviction. When the warden arrived at her cell, the guard straightened instantly. He studied her through the bars, his expression unreadable. "You're entitled to one final request," he said flatly. She swallowed hard, her voice barely steady. "I want to see my German shepherd." Shadow. Silence. The guards exchanged startled looks. No one had expected that. Prison policy allowed final requests, but bringing a trained K9 into death row, that was unheard of. The warden hesitated, tapping the file in his hand. Something about her eyes, the desperation, the raw sincerity made him pause. After a long breath, he finally nodded. "Fine, we'll allow it." As the guards prepared the visitation yard, she sat quietly, staring at the cold floor beneath her feet. Everyone in the prison knew her story, at least the version printed in newspapers. She had been convicted of killing her husband, a crime that shocked the entire community. Prosecutors painted her as a jealous, rage-filled woman who snapped one night and staged a scene to look like an accident. But inside the courtroom, she had whispered only one thing again and again: "I didn't do it." No one believed her. Not the jury, not the media, not even her own attorney. The only one who had ever acted differently was Shadow. During the investigation, he had behaved oddly, almost as if he had sensed something everyone else missed. Now, hours before death, she wondered if he still remembered. The yard gates creaked open again, and every guard instinctively shifted their stance. Shadow was led in by a handler, his leash pulled tight, muscles coiled with raw tension. The moment he spotted her, he froze, ears forward, tail stiff, eyes locked. Then, without warning, a deep, savage snarl tore from his throat. Guards jolted. Hands flew to holsters. The handler struggled to hold him back as Shadow lunged, claws scraping the concrete, teeth flashing in the harsh morning light. She gasped, stepping backward, tears spilling. "Shadow, it's me," she whispered, but the dog didn't soften. Instead, his growls grew sharper, angrier, directed not at her, but at the space behind her dot. She turned slowly, confusion tightening her chest. Behind her stood 3 officers, but Shadow's focus locked onto only one, the younger guard positioned at the edge of the formation. The dog's growls deepened, vibrating through the air like a warning siren. The other officers exchanged uneasy glances. "What's wrong with him?" one muttered. But the younger guard stiffened, his jaw clenched, eyes darting away as if avoiding the dog's stare. Shadow pulled violently against the leash, desperate to reach him. The handler struggled to maintain control. She frowned through her tears. Shadow had never behaved like this, not toward strangers, and certainly not without a reason. The younger guard took a shaky step backward, his face draining of color. "Keep that dog away from me," he snapped, but his voice cracked, betraying a fear no one expected. Shadow lunged again, ferocious, nearly dragging the handler off balance. The other officers tightened their grip on their batons, unsure whether to restrain the dog or step away from their trembling colleague. The warden narrowed his eyes. "Why is he reacting to you?" he asked sharply. The young guard swallowed hard, avoiding the woman's gaze. I don't know." "The dog's crazy," he muttered, but Shadow's fury only escalated. His instincts locked on the guard like he had found something. Or someone. The handler finally managed to redirect Shadow, pulling him a few steps away from the panicking guard. But instead of calming, the dog suddenly swung back toward her, circling her with frantic urgency. She froze, confused, as Shadow sniffed intensely along her jumpsuit, whining, pawing at the fabric near her hip. "Easy, boy." "What are you doing?" she whispered. Shadow pressed harder, clawing at a stitched seam until the thread snapped open. Something small and metallic slipped out, clinking onto the concrete. The officers stared. "What is that?" one murmured. The warden bent down, lifting the object with gloved fingers, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. The warden turned the small object over in his hand, his brows knitting tightly. It was a cufflink engraved with initials matching her late husband. The same cufflink investigators claimed was never found. A chill rippled through the yard. Why was this sewn into her uniform? One officer demanded. The young guard staggered back, panic flashing in his eyes. Shadow snapped toward him again, barking with explosive intensity. The warden's gaze sharpened. "Hold him," he ordered. 2 officers immediately grabbed the trembling guard. "Search him," the warden added. Within seconds, another matching cufflink was found in the guard's pocket. Gasps broke out. "Stop the execution," the warden said, voice hard. "We're reopening everything." The young guard collapsed onto the bench in the interrogation room, sweat dripping down his temples as officers circled him. Shadow sat outside the door, watching through the glass with unblinking intensity, as if waiting for the truth he already knew. "You framed her," the warden said coldly. "Why?" The guard's breath hitched. I never meant for it to go this far," he stammered. "Her husband. He owed me money. A lot. He threatened to expose me. I panicked." "So you killed him," an officer said quietly. The guard nodded, trembling. "I planted the cufflinks. I thought no one would ever suspect her." The warden exhaled sharply. Shadow knew. He recognized your scent from the crime scene. He never forgot. The moment the warden stepped back into the hallway, She rose from the metal bench, her hands trembling. She didn't know what the interrogation had revealed, but when the cell doors slid open and Shadow bounded toward her, tail wagging, eyes bright, she knew something had changed. He leapt into her arms, whining softly as she buried her face in his fur, sobbing with relief. Officers stood quietly, some looking away, humbled by the moment. "You're free," the warden said gently. "All charges are being dropped." Her knees buckled, but Shadow steadied her, pressing his head into her chest. For the first time in months, she could breathe. She was no longer a prisoner, because her dog never stopped fighting for her. Outside the prison gates, morning sunlight warmed her face for the first time in months. Shadow walked proudly beside her, no leash needed, as if guarding her newfound freedom. A nurse approached with a small envelope. "This was found in your husband's belongings," she said softly. Inside was a note he had written days before his death. "If anything happens to me, trust Shadow. He always senses the truth." Her breath caught. Shadow had tried to warn investigators back then, growling at the same guard, but no one listened. Now, as she knelt and hugged him tightly, she whispered, "You saved my life." Shadow pressed his forehead to hers, as if saying he always would.